this session, we will have gained a deeper understanding of the transformative potential of active labor market programs and the policies needed to harness this potential fully. Before we begin, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all our presenters for their expertise and willingness to share their insights here with us today. I would also like to encourage active participation from our audience. Your questions and perspectives are invaluable in shaping our discourse. So, without further ado, let's delve into the vital conversation on how active labor market policies can be a driving force in our journey towards recovery and reactivation. Mr. Duncan Campbell, you will have the floor for your keynote presentation.
Many thanks, Marcus. Good afternoon, colleagues. You'd think after 25 years of making PowerPoints, I'd get it right, but no, I'm afraid not. This is far too long, so I'm going to abandon a lot of this. I have, in essence, three things I'd like to put on the table. One of the first things I want to ask is, what are active labor market policies? Right? And then I'd like to wonder with you together why they haven't been so popular in Asia and Pacific. And then third is why they have become popular in Asia and Pacific and reason why they're on the agenda today in a meeting otherwise devoted to social protection. So let me first, let me turn to the first slide, please, and tell you that's what I've just said. The second slide. Let me give you a definition of active labor market policies. To me, what they do is it's a government policy that endeavors to reduce the barrier of entry that some labor market subgroups face to entrance in the labor market. They've been, there are barriers of entries of various sorts. There's a skill mismatch in the labor market. Certain groups are discriminated against in the labor market. Programs tend to be targeted. They're not across the board for the entire population, but targeted to specific labor market subgroups. Now, where did all this come about? One brief word of history here. We usually associate ALMPs with Denmark. Why? Well, about 30 or 40 years ago, in the European countries where active labor market policies originated, they did so because of a problem called Eurosclerosis at the time, which is a kind of a cheeky way of saying over labor market regulation, relying particularly on passive labor market policy measures. Back in the 1980s, at some point, you could find that 15% of the Dutch labor force was on sick leave. Right? That was not a pandemic. It was the facility with which passive measures to stay out of work were available to many people in Central and Northern European countries in particular. Unemployment benefits. Unemployment benefit, by the way, is supposed to be quasi-active. It's not just the receipt of income. You're also supposed to be looking for a job. But the latter was never a particularly important criterion when you received them in many European countries at the time. The benefits were generous in terms of their replacement rate, and the duration was rather long. So a problem of long-term unemployment ensued. It's here where the so-called Danish model gains relevance. The Danish model was one built on a concept called flexicurity. In other words, it provided the passive benefits generously. You got good replacement income if you were unemployed. But the duration was limited, point one. Point two, to retain these benefits, you needed to enter into a program in which you would upskill yourself or get new skills to facilitate your reentrance to the labor market. That's pretty much where the concept of active labor market policies came from. Now, what kind of policies are we talking about? Next slide, please. We can even skip to the next one in the interest of time. Largely, we're talking about schemes that operate on both the supply and the demand side of the labor market. So a typical supply side of the demand market policy would be training. As we know, there are training needs, there are skill surpluses and skill shortages at any one time in a labor market. And to facilitate entry into the labor market, you need the right skills. Active labor market policies provide that. Entrepreneurial support. As you well know, wage earner status in this region of the world is at best 50% of the labor market, if not less. Right? So most people are own account workers and self-employed. Right? So we need policies to ensure that the self-employed worker can actually acquire skills to be able to be self-employed effectively. Also, entrepreneurs and small businesses that might already be well established might receive a subsidy in return for hiring people who are difficult to place in the labor market. So that would be, for example, a program that acts on the demand side of the labor market. A big category is public employment or public works schemes. That's about half of active labor market spending in the Asia-Pacific region. We have, in fact, a representative from Nepal who would tell us about one particular public employment scheme in his country. The effort there is to provide income support in exchange for work from those people who would otherwise be difficult to place in the labor market, all this for a limited duration. In addition to these supply and demand measures, there's the mediative measure of the Public Employment Service. So I'll jump to my conclusion to say the most effective active labor market policy agent of any is the Public Employment Service. It operates on the supply and demand side of the labor markets. Its job is to mediate and make a match, to facilitate job matching between demand and supply. It is the most cost-effective. It is the most widespread and widely used active labor market policy in this region, but I think also just about anywhere. So those are the sorts of policies we have. The question is, all right, well, if these active policies do what they promise to do, which is to be more effective in inserting people into the labor market, then why haven't they grown in the Asian Pacific region? I don't need to show the slide to tell you that in this particular part of the world, the average expenditure on active labor market policies is 0.1% of GDP. Right? This is precisely 20 times less than the Danes spend on their Danish programs. It's usually about 5 or 10 times less than an average European country would spend, but it's not too much lower than what an Anglo-Saxon country would spend on active labor market policies. Nonetheless, in Asia, there hasn't been that spending. Why? I would advance at least one big reason for this, and it has to do with the success of an earlier growth model in the countries here. And we all know about this growth model of export-oriented industrialization, where structural transformation in many East and Southeast Asian countries was facilitated by the absorption of surplus labor from agriculture into relatively low-skilled jobs in growing manufacturing sector. Such a transition is not highly skill dependent. Additional policies on training were not necessarily needed. Growth was heady, it was strong. There was an abundance of opportunity and vacancies available to make this structural transformation occur without policy. And so active labor market policies were, in a sense, superfluous to this first remarkably successful era of structural transformation. The issue is the third point that I said that I'd like to discuss is, well, then why are we talking about it here today? And the third reason really is, I would say, fourfold. The first has to do with what I've just said. This earlier era of structural transformation has pretty much run its course in most Asian and Pacific economies. The labor has been fully absorbed in many places. It's now a question of breaking out of what some call the middle income trap in countries and increasing the productivity of labor to be able to compete in an increasingly globalized world economy. Now, the minute you try to increase the productivity of labor, you're talking about skills in need. And that, of course, is where labor market policy can come in handy and be useful in making that transition. So this is one reason why Asian governments are beginning to pay more attention to how much they spend on facilitating labor market entry at higher levels of productivity. And there are three others which I'll group simply as one. Three trends are upon us. And they argue for the need for labor market preparedness, all of them. We've heard about them in this conference already. Certainly one is climate change and adjusting to climate change. Another one is certainly the digital transformation. And a third, about which we've also been hearing, including in the plenary session this morning, is aging Asia and what to do with the problem of the older worker. There are many facets to each of these. In a certain sense, at least conveniently enough for my talk, they all boil down to one thing, right? Skills. There are already countries in the region that are finding skills shortages relative to greening their economies, relative to the extension of digital competencies that they're looking for in the labor market and not finding. And there are already problems, sometimes acute in a few countries, of what to do with an aging workforce. The issue of the aging workforce is that not only are people getting older, but the fertility rate is declining. With those two things happening simultaneously, it results in a shrinkage of labor supply, a shrinkage of the working age population. A shrinkage of the working age population, ceteris paribus, if you do nothing about it, means a shrinkage of the economy, period. There are already signs of economic shrinkage, one reads, in Japan, as a result of the absolute decline in the population in that country. China last year, for the first time, had a country in absolute population decline. Right? What's the solution in economic terms if you want to maintain the level of your economy and also increase economic growth? It can only come from productivity. Productivity requires skill acquisition. Whence the interest in active labor market policies kind of being resurrected in the Asian field. In another presentation we could have, but I'm not going to do today, it would be interesting for each of you to know from your country's perspective just how big a deal skill acquisition is in the digital transformation or in the greening of the economy. Certainly, there are core skills that need to be acquired in order to make the best use of the digital economy, not merely to become a Gojek driver in Indonesia, who is a member of the digital economy, but actually to adapt digital technologies and innovate with them. Those core skills in any economy are always a minority of the total labor force. Right? Thanks. Got it. In any case, the skills to be able to use the economies effectively need also some of these core skills, and that's of interest to every economy in the region, not to just become digitally connected platform workers. Okay, and I might just mention a word on older workers too. The interest in older workers is to increase their labor supply. We look around the region and retirement ages are being changed. They're not being made mandatory. There are incentives to try to keep the older worker at work. There's a very simple way to keep the older worker at work: get rid of his pension. Right? But that's not what people have in mind. They want them to be gainfully employed. So that will require also a reacquisition, an upskilling of skills that older workers have that may have obsolesced in the transitions that we're talking about. So for all these reasons, that's why the topic of ALMPs is on the table today. I look forward to this discussion, and I also look forward to offering one or two examples that are concrete when it comes time for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Duncan, for this very insightful and comprehensive presentation. In the interest of time, I will give now the floor to you, Madame Ariola, to make your keynote presentation on skills mobility pathways for microcontrollers.
All right. Good afternoon. Is the slide ready? Good afternoon. Thank you very much for to the ADB for allowing IOM to present its findings on the promoting labor and skills mobility pathways for migrant workers. First slide, please. Next slide. Okay. As you know, there are 24 million migrant workers in Asia Pacific. 1 out of 3 migrants in the world come from Asia and the Pacific. So as you know, like more than half of the population of the world comes from Asia Pacific, and 39% of migrant workers are women. It's worth noting also that 62.1% are migrating because of labor. Most of the sectors for employment are agriculture, manufacturing, construction, hospitality, domestic and cleaning services. But as you know, Asia particularly is also the source of health workers. There are issues now that are happening in Asia, like in the Philippines, there's a shortage of nurses. Because as you know, because of the pandemic, and right after the pandemic, Europe has been boosting their health services, and also the United States. So before joining IOM, I used to be the Vice Minister of the Philippines for Migrant Workers Affairs of Foreign Affairs. We had around 250,000 nurses. And then come 2022 and 2023, everyone's gone. And I just came from Sri Lanka. That is also the issue. What's more difficult for Sri Lanka is most of them, the government is the one who brings, who sent to school the nurses and the doctors. And there's also already a shortage. So there's already a brain drain. Okay, next slide, please. This is a very interesting map, and this is the exciting part of Asia Pacific. As you know, the migration trends there's a lot of movement within ASEAN itself. As you know, like in ASEAN, there are countries of destination like Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei, and also now Thailand. Especially for the Mekong region, Thailand is a country of destination. But there's also a movement from South Asia to ASEAN, and also ASEAN to East Asia, and also South Asia to ASEAN and towards East Asia. But one thing's very interesting is that South Asia, particularly the countries of Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, plus the Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia and the Philippines, comprise 71.6% of the workers in the Gulf Cooperation Council. That's a very big number. That's 22.1 million out of the 30.87 million in the Gulf. Last May, we had the Asia GCC dialogue. This is, as you know very well, there's an issue of kafala, which is, to some human rights advocates, they call it the the traditional sponsorship system that exists in the Middle East that oftentimes lead to slavery and slave-like conditions. And the good thing about it is that the GCC is reforming now. There are a lot of changes, but the dialogue continues, and there's a lot of processes within the region. And this region is one of the most advanced when it comes to the Colombo process, the Abu Dhabi dialogue between the countries of origin and the countries of destination. And of course, there's also a Doha process. And of course, IOM has this Asia GCC dialogue. We are looking at promoting the safe, orderly, and regular migration because of the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. But this is the migration corridor. And quite interestingly, in the Pacific, of course, the South Pacific, there is a movement towards Australia and also to New Zealand. And these are more seasonal workers. When I was there, there is also an issue of brain drain because of the wage differentials. A lot are moving. But it's another story in the North Pacific when you're talking about Micronesia, Marshall Islands, and also Palau, because they have COFA. COFA is the Compact of Free Association with the United States. Unlike many of us here in Asia and the Pacific, the people from Palau, Micronesia, and Marshall Islands don't need a visa to go to the US because of the compact. And there is a lot of movement to go to the US to work there and stay there. So this is becoming really a problem for these countries. So there's a lot of, the migration corridor in Asia Pacific is quite complex, and it's I think it's the quite active. Next slide, please. So what are the drivers of labor migration in Asia? First is income and employment differentials. For countries of origin, if you compare the income that they will earn in their country of origin to the country of destination, it's very, very attractive. For example, for domestic workers, for the Philippines, I know the minimum wage is $400. But if they go to, that's for the GCC. But if they go to Hong Kong, it can go up to $600 or $700. It's something that they cannot earn from the country of origin. And another is, as mentioned a while ago by the previous speaker, there's an aging and demographic shifts. Several years ago, even the ambassador of Singapore was saying, in a couple of years, they will be needing more health workers, and they will be needing more caregivers because of aging population. And this is already happening in Japan and also in South Korea. If you go to the Middle East, if you go to Israel, almost all the caregivers there come from Southeast Asia. So there is really this need as the populations age. Economic transformation and infrastructure development, as economies improve and there's infrastructure, there is really a need, especially if there's a construction boom. Because especially when it comes to the construction, it's very much needed. And as you can see, especially in the GCC, most of the construction workers come from South Asia. So there is a need because the local populations, in countries like the UAE, 90% are migrants. In Qatar, at least 87, I think, or 78, some thereabouts are migrants. So the blue-collared work is not something that is done by nationals. So they really need migrants. And then technology and automation in the workplace. As the economies improve, there's technology and automation, there's a need for workers who are tech-savvy, and then they continue to open the labor market. And of course, climate change. This country is, as mentioned yesterday by Secretary Gatchalian, is #1 in the World Risk Index when it comes to disasters. Not only climate change. We have, there's like a volcano eruption, there are also earthquakes, but the climate change here is also forcing people to move. Migration is an adaptation strategy, but at the same time, for many countries of origin, people migrate to be able to give their families a better life, and at the same time, to be able to repair what was destroyed by the typhoons and the cyclones. And this is a narrative that is very common in South Asia and Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. Challenges faced by migrant workers. First, costly regular migration pathways. Many workers tend to go to the irregular pathway because it's very difficult for them to go through the tedious recruitment process and going through, for example, the government processes to be able to check contract verification. And for example, here in Southeast Asia, we have a visa-free policy. So we can go into each other's country and stay there for a couple of days without using a visa, which is sometimes abused by some people, which leads to a lot of irregular migrant workers and also trafficking in persons. There are also unethical recruitment practices, like work-borne recruitment fees and barriers to accessing grievance and remedy mechanisms. IOM believes that the employer should pay, but there are instances when it's not in the contract, but when the migrant enters the country of destination, then the salary is withheld to pay for the cost of recruitment. And that's why in the last Asia GCC dialogue, one of the main issues is lowering recruitment costs so that it will be a lesser burden to migrant workers. And then lack of access to social protection, it happens. Especially when it comes to if there is a migrant who becomes sick, or there are also some instances when they die. Some countries, for example, like the Philippines, bring home, the shipment of remains is borne by the government if the employer does not pay for it. But not all countries do that. And also, for example, there are instances when the insurance is not enough to take care of the migrant workers' needs. Then some countries here in Southeast Asia and South Asia will take care of those. But not all countries are created alike, so it's becoming a burden. And there's very limited insurance and medical insurance. And of course, forced labor. Not everyone follows what's in the bilateral labor agreement, or not everyone follows what's in the contract. There are excessive working hours, restriction of movement, and debt bandage. And there are instances that the passports are confiscated, the phones are confiscated, and they cannot, reach out to their families. And this is like a narrative in this part of the world, here in Asia. And I'm sure my brothers and sisters from this region will know that this is happening to a lot of migrant workers in Asia. So what does the future hold? Next slide, please. Migrant workers will continue to play a vital role in the economic transformation journeys of upper middle income countries. Technology and automation in the workplace may require migrants to upskill or reskill to keep pace. And of course, climate change is the game changer. It is something that, of course, like if you look at 8 out of the 15 countries here in Asia are in the World Risk Index. And this is something that we Asian countries are trying to work on double time, because this is something that was not foreseen like 20 years ago. That's why people will continue to migrate, either to adopt or try to alleviate the suffering of their families in the country of origin. And finally, next slide, please. We just want to, for those of you who are interested to read on what I've said, this is available in the IOM website. We have several publications on this. But at the end of the day, of course, it's something, migration is a very controversial issue. It is something that if you see in other regions, it's the most acrimoniously debated issue for countries of origin and destination, and even countries of transit. But of course, for IOM, it is our desire and it is our dream that there will come a time that people will migrate, not out of desperation, but out of choice. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ariola, for this very interesting presentation. We come now to the round of respondents. Mr. Dakal, you have the floor.
Slide, please. Distinguished panelist, moderator, and friends, good afternoon, namaste, and warm welcome. It is my immense pleasure to hear. I am sharing the youngest public employment guarantee, cash for work, in this session. This program is first time we share in international forum like this. Thank you for this ADV. Next slide. This is my slide outline presentation. Next slide. Nepal has a very young population. Out of 29 million, we have 19.2 million labor force. The age between 18 to 40 years of age, we have 11.2 million. We have population dividend opportunity. We have poverty rate, 15%. It is most of the people lives in the rural area, the poverty. Next slide. This is our sector of employment and establishment. Next slide. In our economy, regarding the sectoral contribution of GDP, agriculture is decreasing and service sector is increasing. The production sector is constant. Next slide. These are our challenge of our domestic employment. Especially, this is the background of our this cash for work Prime Minister Employment Program. Next slide, please. As earlier I said, the Prime Minister Employment Program is the youngest employment guarantee cash for work program to manage constitutional obligation of Nepal. We have the Right to Employment Act and regulations. Our act guarantees the 100 days of employment to the registered poor and vulnerable, economically vulnerable people. Give that there are less employment opportunity in the country, we have adopted public works program as a major employment creation tool. Our safety net approach targets the population and vulnerable population who are economically active, 18 to 59 years. It is a flagship national program implemented by all the local government, geographically cover all over the country. We have established employment service center in each local level, delivering and employment support to citizens. We have clear institutional framework and committees. Regarding the rationale of this program, the economic and social condition, there was a clear reason to start a national employment program. Nepal has a chronic poverty and vulnerability that needs a clear poverty and vulnerability reduction approaches. As employment has direct correlation with poverty reduction, we have a create employment opportunity to the unemployed and vulnerable people. In the beginning, we want to stop the forceful migration from this program, but it is a part-time, just 100 days program. It could not. So, unemployment allowance is not appropriate for the youth population because they are economically active. So, of course, we have a statutory regulation article of the Constitution and Right to Employment Act and employment, Prime Minister Employment Guidelines. Next slide. We assume in the beginning, this is the rationale of Prime Minister Employment Program as mentioned here. Next slide. We assume in the beginning of the program, we prepared of next slide, please. 5 years project document at that time. This fiscal year is last year of this program period. Our theory of change suggests improving the living standard of those registered unemployed. The PMEB outcome is anticipated to create productive employment while promoting social protection through guaranteed employment. The overall objective was to reduce the poverty and the vulnerability. The objective of the program regarding the program is launched February 2019. The major emphasis to deliver employment service to the guarantee employment. As a part of the social safety net, we added skill components, we need vertical and horizontal convergence, policy coherence, durable and economic assets creation, and various studies. Next slide. Another, other next. Next. Regarding the major achievements in this 5 years of this program, total 3.5 million people are registered in our EMIS system, requesting to participate in the employment guarantee scheme. For this fiscal year, we have approximately 885,000 people registered as unemployed seeking employment. Look over next graph, we can see a total 7,000 and 1,200 people received employment opportunity. The PMEP received additional fund in 2020-21, 6 billion Nepali rupees from Asian Development Bank. Thank you for the bank. Let me bring our attention to the third graph. We got the who got the employment? Our last 4 years statistics reveals the Dalit, indigenous, and female received huge attention. The data is fairly like to the demographic composition of our country. If we would not have taken the inclusive approach in the program, the statistics would have different. Regarding the next slide, please. Next also. The program for the 5 years of the program implementation, there was no registered unemployed. The first year, 2018-19, was like a pilot to observe the cash for work initiatives. Based on the learning, the program changed its operation procedures. It is expected that program would increase its performance. The performance of the program implementation improved. However, COVID-19 lockdown started in that time. First 2 years of implementation was not satisfactory. From the third year of implementation, the program started gear up with the employment guarantee scheme. There is a gradual improvement in the program. Next slide, please. We have done a mid-term evaluation of this program. Due to this program, the third-party evaluation have done. Due to the intensive effort of the program, female beneficiary is slightly higher than the 50%. This is constant to the national statistics between male and female in the country. Having said, there is a huge resource gap. Only 20% of registered unemployed received employment opportunity. The program anticipates active support from the local government. The federal budget is also reduced due to the recent financial crisis. The local level government contribution is also reduced these days. We have some key learning from this project. Next slide, please. We noted that the public works program is a great instrument to create employment in rural area. It is also very effective to recover from natural disasters. We have noted that the program has enhanced the local economy during the stress period. However, our learning suggests that public works program is urban and the economic zone are not affected. PMEP blanket approach, we follow the blanket approach in the rural and urban area. It is not effective. PMEP till now, we have low amount of partnership between the 3 tiers of government. Some local level are fuller ownership and share the cost highly satisfactory, but some are not. It is our one of the, next slide, please. Next. One of the learning is the wages is pay through the bank. It is greater meaning. It is difficult for illiterate poor to access money from bank regardless, PMEP enforces the wage payment through the bank. The benefits are from many folds. Among these, increased financial transparency, increased financial awareness, and saving. We have, next slide, please. We have major challenges in this program. The COVID-19 affects this program. We could not, capacity development, especially our keynote speakers, the skill training is important. We could not provide from this program. Due to lower fiscal space, we have a budget crisis in this program right now. And another is, it is a blanket approach, just say the rural area and the urban area is different. So we follow it is our challenge. We have chronic scarcity of employment opportunity in the country. Active labor market initiatives such as skilling, employment changes, and other initiatives for the people are suggested as potential course of action for future. The challenges are consisting with the challenge of similar employment guarantee scheme around the other country, I think. Productive employment is one of the outcomes of the PMEP. However, synthesizing public works program and the productive employment is a very difficult task. We can improve the labor market outcomes using public works program instrument. Our learning shows it is to challenge the blanket approach of both rural and urban area is not appropriate. Our current learning suggests that we need to encourage our local government to take more ownership, both from the resource sharing and improved program implementation. We are currently piloting active labor market activities in the economic zones. Now we are going to change its modality. Government of Nepal revising the PMEP direction, we have given the mandate of enhanced labor market outcomes. Next slide, please. It needs, as PMEP, to active labor market interventions like our keynote speakers already mentioned here. We are currently reviewing our program as soon as possible, a new structure of PMEP. Now we are preparing and structuring its modality, minimum employment scheme to, next slide, please, to labor market intervention policy. So it may work near future. The service delivery, next slide, please. The service delivery system of this labor employment, we have make a system. We are taking an ambitious approach of integrating all labor and employment function at the local level. Employment service center is going to be a key service delivery point. Our concept is that an individual must get all labor and employment support from its local government. This can be any of the support from integration, counseling to job matching. Our revised approaches shall be a funnel approach. We have higher political ownership. We are thinking about resource funding from all the three tiers of the government. Yes, it shall be a service delivery point. There is a convergence, all the service, policy, employment creation, migration support, and creating employment creation economic system. Finally, it is a challenge to ensure that the right of employment, we are closely monitoring our output and outcome from review. We are going to make an appropriate policy change. From this presentation, I have included the PMEP is ensuring right to employment. I have highlighted the challenge and its learning. Finally, I present the potential course of direction to manage employment service in the country. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dakal, for presenting the Prime Minister's Employment Program. We'd like now to give the floor to Ms. Ruendai for her response to the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, as the request, Bapenas would be asked to present regarding Indonesian government experience in implementing Kartu Prakerja program. For information or disclaimer, maybe actually Bapenas doesn't, as a coordinator or regarding implementing Kartu Prakerja program in Indonesia. There is a PMO or program manager officer become a coordinator regarding the implementing Kartu Prakerja. Ibu Deni is executive director as a PMO was invited as a speaker in this conference. She was a speaker or panelist to present implementing Kartu Prakerja program in detail yesterday in the other session. Today, I will try to present the implementing Kartu Prakerja program in generally and only focus on making policy related manpower policy, especially improving the quality of human resources development. The next slide, maybe I want to skip the, effort made face challenges in human resource development are to create a generation of hard workers who have high abilities in knowledge and technology. This is done through improving the education system, especially those related to revitalization of vocational education and training, as well as increasing the abilities of workers and job seekers through training and certification program. So in 2019, it is planned to launch the Kartu Prakerja program. Kartu Prakerja program is included in National Medium-Term Development Plan in 2020 until 2024, related to enhancing enhancing rule and collaboration in industry or in vocational education and training, 2, reforming the implementation of vocational education and training, 3, strengthening competency certification system, and 4, strengthening the governance of vocational education and training, which includes the implementation of the Kartu Prakerja program. It is the duty of Bapenas to carry out the planning and budgeting process, as well as carry out monitoring and evaluation. Next slide, please. The strategy and policy in 2020 until 2024 National Medium-Term National Development Plan are related to increasing productivity and competitiveness through industrial collaboration-based vocational education and training by improving the governance of vocational education and training. This is being implemented in stages through the 2020 and 2021 government work plans regarding the implementation of the Kartu Prakerja. Next slide, please. In 2020, Indonesia officially launched program Kartu Prakerja through Presidential Regulation number 36 of 2020. So this program was initially designed to develop competencies for job seekers, workers who have experienced layoff, and or workers who need to improve their skills. Besides of this, it aims to develop workforce competency, increase workforce productivity and competitiveness, and foster entrepreneurship. Next slide, please. When the COVID-19 pandemic occurred, there was adjustment to program Kartu Prakerja to mitigate COVID-19. There is a presidential regulation number 76/2020 for this adjustment by amending presidential regulation number 36/1990. The focus changed the following. 1. To prevent the spread of COVID-19, online training is carried out. Number 2, Kartu Prakerja program is part of effort to anticipate the social and economic impact of COVID-19 on society. Number 3, Kartu Prakerja are also prioritized for workers who have been laid off and for small business owners affected by COVID-19. 4, Kartu Prakerja is also as a social assistance effort to mitigate people affected by COVID-19. Next slide, please. There is a presidential regulation number 113 of 2022, which is the second chance related to job creation, which is tasked with formulating and drafting policy for program Kartu Prakerja, including its evaluation and implementation. The next slide. Yeah. Based on the presidential regulation number 113 of 2020, it is implemented using a regular scheme and is no longer classified as social assistance, but is gradually being adjusted to the original aim of establishing the Kartu Prakerja program. This is also in line with the decreasing level of spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. The training program consists of offline and online training. Offline training is provided is full in class, and hybrid training consists of 30% of the training material is provided online via webinars, and the remaining 70% offline is provided by instructor for final evaluation. Meanwhile, online training provided training materials by instructor via webinars. The total number of people who register for the Kartu Prakerja was more than 40 million people who verified, and about 18 million people were eligible to receive the program from batch 1 until 60. The total number of active recipients of the Kartu Prakerja program is about 17 million people. This includes 38 provinces and 415 districts and cities. Meanwhile, there were about 60 million recipients Kartu Prakerja until from 2020 until 2022 with semi-social assistance, with incentive distributing amounting to 40.70 trillion rupiah. Based on data on August 30, 2023, under the normal schema includes 164 training institutions that actively participate in the training program. The average duration of training is 15.1 hours. The average price of training purchased by participant is 1,460,000 rupiah, and 40% of training methods are offline and 60% are online. Next slide, please. This slide contains of comparison of the semi-social assistance scheme and the normal scheme. For the semi-social assistance scheme, training is carried online. The budget allocation for training is 1 million rupiahs. Pocket money disbursed in the amount of 2 million rupiahs in 4 months. This is okay. This is also mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, in the normal scheme, training is online, offline, and hybrid. Meanwhile, the budget allocation for training is 3.5 million rupiah, and pocket money given after training is 600,000 rupiah. From the 16.4 million recipient of the Kartu Prakerja program, it is as stated at the previous slide, there are 2.6 million beneficiaries who were previously unemployed and become entrepreneurs, working or employed as freelancer and others. Meanwhile, the types of training provided by by Kartu Prakerja refer to types of work related to one critical occupation list 2018, number 2 Indonesia occupational tax and skill 2020, 3 online vacancy outlook 2020, and the future of job report 2022. There is a link below as I mentioned. Okay, I think my presentation is finished. I will stop here. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mulyandari. For your very interesting presentation, for presenting the pre-employment card program of Indonesia. In the interest of time, we continue straight away. Mr. Liu, you have the floor.
Yeah, okay, good afternoon. Just 7 minutes for me to go. So I would like to go through my presentation and focus on main point. First slide, please. In my presentation, there are 4 main parts. Some typical point of Vietnam's labor market and public employment services in Vietnam, active labor market policy, ways forward. So due to time limit, I focus on the active labor market policies. Duncan has said that there are 5 types of labor market activities. So what kind of labor market activities that Vietnam has taken nowadays? And slide number 16, please. Slide number 16. Yes, okay. Number 16. Yes, slide number 16. Okay. So what kind of active labor market policies are available in Vietnam? As you know, in Vietnam is now the beginning of the digital transformation, so that the digital economy is growing very fast. Why it's growing very fast? Based on our government supportive policy framework. And we have, a program for national digital transformation towards 2025 and vision for 2030. And then national strategy for digital economy and society towards 2025 and vision to 2030. And another one is national master plan on e-commerce 2021 to 2025. And the achievement that we reached during 2021 to 2020 2023 now, is very remarkable. That's showing the trend that online, shopping is surging and online payments services are booming and e-commerce and digital economy is growing. So next slide, please. And, digital economy create a lot of works for Vietnamese labor market. 68% of job in Vietnam require digital skills, but by 2030, more than 1 million IT workers needed for Vietnamese labor market. And as we are now attracting a lot of FDI to Vietnam, so that the leveling up our labor force, especially digital skills, is very important. And by 2045, an estimated 10 million net new jobs created, mainly modern services in finance, communication, and tourism. Next slide, please. And we are now, focused on leveling up our labor force to, to serve for the FDI as well as the domestic enterprises as well. Especially from, this is number 239. This is about Prime Minister approval for, the strategy for development of vocational education during 2021 to 2030 period, with vision to 2045. We, allocate a lot of budgets here for the leveling up our labor force. And especially the resolution, number 11. Okay, this is the time of economic recovery, not COVID, the COVID, but the time of economic recovery. So the resolution of number 11 here, we focus on the social economic recovery and development program and implementation of the previous resolution of our National Assembly on fiscal and monetary policies for supporting the program. And the resolution number 6, this is the first resolution of Vietnam to develop our labor market with the flexible, modern, efficient, sustainable, and integrated labor market, for rapid social economic recovery. Next slide, please. For the decision, 2,239, focus on leveling up our labor force. In order to achieve objective of rapidly develop vocational education to meet various needs of the labor market, the people and the increasing requirement as the quantity, structure, and quality of skilled human resources, we at the same time we implementing 8 measures, okay, in order to achieve this objective. Next slide, please. And for resolution number 11, and we spend a lot of money here. Next slide, please. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, so we spend money to ensure social security and support for employment. Okay. So what we spend for? Renting houses, accommodation for workers who are working in enterprises in the industries, parks, export sourcing zone, or key economic zones. And continuing, renewing, studying, and adopting policies to prompt support people and workers who face difficulties caused by COVID-19. And with 3,000 billion Vietnamese dong to support loan interest of 2% in the 2 years period of 2023 for loan with interest of more than 6% per year disbursed by Vietnamese bank for social policies in the period of 2 years, 22 and 23. And we continue to financing the bank for social policies, for lending to employers, for payment, and production recovery, wages, and ensuring its feasibilities and quick implementation. This is just kind of support for employers and to attract more workers or to work for her companies. Invest in reinforcing the connection between national labor supply and demand on the online platform. And we focus on digitalize our service, delivery of our public employment service system. And we spend a lot of money here. And, yes, okay, thank you very much. And equip tablet computers according to the program for our children, with 1,000 billion Vietnamese dong. Next slide, please. Yes, and, a lot of program policies with, big sum of money to support for employers as well as for workers. Next slide, please. And at the same time, we are, implementing 3 national target programs. The first one is national target program for socio-economic development of, for ethnic minority and mountainous areas. And the second national target programs, for sustainable poverty reduction in the period of 21 to 25. And the third national target program is to build new rural areas for the period of 21 to 25. So, 3 national target programs here, we, allocate, big sum of money for each, subject or each infrastructure development as well as for the vulnerable groups in Vietnam labor market. Next slide, please. Yes, okay. So what we focus here on the reform here is, just, I think, to attract more foreign FDI, to invest in Vietnam as well as develop our internal capacity. It's, our barriers is, it's just administrative procedures, and strengthen the handling of administrative processes on the online platform, and push forward the digital transformation is the way forward, and that's an obstacle or barrier for our development. So thank you so much for attention. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Liu, for making the case for Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, as we draw to a close in this session, I would like to thank the presenters very much for their very insightful presentations. Unfortunately, we cannot have a Q&A session due to time constraints. It has been a fruitful and insightful discussion in which we delved into the critical importance of active labor market programs in supporting individuals, communities, and economies during times of crisis and beyond. I was asked by the organizers to summarize some of the key points mentioned during the discussion, and here are some of the key takeaways as I see it very briefly. First, resilience through adaptation to changing labor markets. We discussed how the nature of work is evolving rapidly with the ongoing digital transformation and the impact of global events like the COVID-19 pandemic. Active labor market programs must adapt to these changes to remain effective in helping individuals find meaningful employment. Second, the importance of skills. A central theme was the vital role of skills development programs within active labor market strategies. Equipping individuals with the right skills, especially in emerging industries and technologies, is crucial for their employability and resilience in the face of economic disruptions. Third, skills development for migrant workers. In our discussion, we underscored the critical need to include migrant workers in active labor market programs. Migrant workers often face unique challenges, including language barriers and credential recognition issues. Therefore, it is imperative to design and implement programs that specifically address their needs. Skills development initiatives tailored for migrant workers can empower them with the necessary skills and qualifications to access better employment opportunities, integrate into host communities, and contribute positively to the economies of both their host and their countries of origin. Ensuring that these programs are inclusive and culturally sensitive is vital for maximizing their impact and supporting the economic well-being of migrant workers. Fourth, inclusivity matters. We emphasize the importance of inclusive programs that reach marginalized and vulnerable populations, ensuring that no one is left behind in the process of recovery. This includes addressing gender disparities and providing equal opportunities for all. Fifth, partnerships are key. The collaboration between governments, private sector organizations, and civil society organizations was highlighted as a key driver of success. Public-private partnerships can leverage resources, expertise, and networks to maximize the impact of active labor market programs. 6, measuring impact. It is important to have robust monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to assess the effectiveness of these programs accurately. Data-driven decision-making can help refine strategies and allocate resources more efficiently. 7th, flexibility and innovation. The session underscored the importance of flexibility and innovation in program design. The ability to pivot and adapt quickly to changing circumstances is crucial in times of crisis. 8th, learning from each other and global cooperation. International cooperation and knowledge sharing in the development and improvement of active labor market programs is important. Learning from successful practices in other countries can provide valuable insights. And finally, 9th, increased funding. One of the resounding themes from our discussion today is the urgency of increasing financial investment in active labor market policies. Adequate funding is essential to expand the reach and impact of these programs, allowing them to serve a broader spectrum of the population and provide more comprehensive support. It's important to recognize that while the benefits of such programs might be substantial, they often require sustained and substantial financial commitments to ensure their effectiveness in times of crisis and recovery. By channeling more resources into active labor market policies, governments can not only help individuals and communities bounce back from economic challenges, but also stimulate economic growth and stability in the long term. Increased funding will enable these programs to adapt, innovate, and provide the necessary support to job seekers and employers, ultimately contributing to a more robust and resilient economy. In conclusion, active labor market programs are a cornerstone of our efforts to navigate the road to recovery and reactivation. They play a pivotal role in equipping individuals with the skills and support they need to find meaningful employment, foster economic resilience, and ensuring a more inclusive and equitable future for all. As we move forward, let us remember the insights shared today and continue to work collaboratively across sectors and borders to build a brighter, more resilient and inclusive economy. Once again, thank you very much for your attendance and thank you very much for your presentations. Thank you.
Sir Marcos, I will announce. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to remind our participants who attended this morning's session in the plenary who use our earpiece translator. We still are looking for some of it. In case you found one or have brought it with you, we request to kindly turn it over to our secretariat to be found outside of this plenary hall. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot, Marcus.